Good afternoon, everyone. It's Doris Brinker with DB Healthcare Consulting and Education, and as indicated by the title, this video is 5 considerations for choosing the correct coding and or billing program. So perhaps when you search or you're starting to consider medical coding, you did what I did here. So you went on to google.com or you binged it, whatever search engine you prefer, and you probably got a lot of hits. According to Google, I've got 52,300,000 results. That's a lot of results and a lot of data to go through, but hopefully at the conclusion of this video, you'll have a little more insight into selecting a proper program. If you've not selected a program and you're in the middle of it, you can make a decision on what you do with that moving forward. So in no specific order, I'm going to cover the 5 considerations you should factor when choosing a coding and or billing program. So first, I want to make sure you're clear on what those things are. Medical coding is the process of abstracting, codifying, or classifying data for claims preparation and or tracking and research purposes, period. That's all medical coding is. And I say that's all it is, although it's really simplistic. It's not quite as simplistic as it sounds. I'm oversimplifying in that regard. Medical billing partners and pairs with coding. So there are two things that really work very closely together. So a medical biller will take coding data, couple that with demographic data from the patient, practice information or facility information or provider information, and put it all together beautifully on a pre-formatted form or in electronic format. So a biller might submit a claim via paper, or they might submit a claim electronically. They may do it for or on behalf of a physician or provider or other kind of supplier, such as an ambulance company, a DME company, an infusion company, or they could do it for or on behalf of a facility. Think about a hospital, any medical center in the country, right? So based on where you work, you're going to be doing the same thing, just using different forms and books and whatever to do it. So now that you're clear on what billing is versus coding, let's first start talking about coding. Again, this is in no specific order of importance. I think they're all important. Number one, you want to ask yourself, what's your goal? I often use the phrase, if I was selling you my car and it often cut off on me or the AC was broke, I probably wouldn't tell you that. Right? Most people wouldn't tell you that. I would tell you that because, like, whatever. But most people wouldn't tell you that. So you really have to keep that in mind when you look for a billing or coding program. The person trying to sell you the program may not be so honest with you, right? Because they're trying to sell you. Think about what your goal is, right? So if it is your intention to, when I Googled here, medical coding jobs. So when I go medical coding jobs, I get all of these different jobs that come up. And I'm like, whoa, coding specialist, Vallejo resources. I don't know what that is. Ooh, and I see a medical coder for Florida Medical Center. And I say, yeah, I want to work in the hospital. I want to code in the hospital. Let me apply for this job at Florida Medical Center, right? Then I want to look at the details of the job. Besides just where it is, right? I want to know what is required to hold that job, and I'm not seeing that on this one, so let me actually go to this Vallejo. There we go. Hopefully we get more hits with that. Here, read more. What did I miss? Read more. So if I want to hold this job, stop it. If I want to hold this job, I am going to need either a certified professional coder credential or a certified coding specialist credential, physician-based, okay? And it has to be current. So there are 2 organizations, if you are considering medical coding, that you want to consider. And this is just kind of general. If you want to be super, super specified, like, the RCC, if you want to specifically just do radiology and just radiology coding, RCC is also pretty recognized. So if you're trying to specialize in that, if you just say, hey, I want to be coding, I want to code for a hospital or whatever, then these are the general core certifications you can look for. The CPC is a credential by the American Academy of Professional Coders, AAPC. The Certified Coding Specialist Physician is by the American Health Information Management Association, or AHIMA. Okay, so it is safe to say if you hold a coding credential from AHIMA or the AAPC, you're probably in pretty good shape on your coding career, or your journey to start your coding career because you have a valid, recognized credential. So number one, find out what your goal is, right? And maybe it's not specific. You just want to work for a hospital. You just want to do medical coding, and you'll plant your feet wherever it goes, but you know it's in that area. Start looking at jobs that you would desire to hold and find out what the requirements for those jobs are, right? Because then you know you're on path, right? If I am applying for a job and it requires that, and the program I'm in doesn't prepare me for that, there's no need for me to do it. So number two, again, no specific order. What is the format of the program, right? So we all learn differently. I'm a bit of a mixed learner. Some things I'm very kinesthetic, other things not so much. So when you learn, are you a person who can learn? They have online programs, as we saw in the search, and then they have some live programs. They have programs that will teach you just coding or just billing. There are programs that will teach you billing and coding, right? So first, do you want an online format? Can you tolerate that? Or do you have to be in a classroom? There is no right or wrong answer. It's simply what's right for you and what's right for someone else. Okay, so if you have an online program or a live program, these are questions you should ask yourself. Do you have flexibility in your scheduling, right? Are you only limited in the time that you have to study, right? Like, oh, I can only do it during the day because I work at night, or I can only do it at night because I work during the day, or I work fluctuating schedules day and night and I need to have a program with flexibility. If that is your story and that is your life and how it is, your options are shrinking because not every program is going to be run, at all times of day. Some may only have a morning class or an evening class if it's live. If it's online, it may have a little more flexibility, but not always. Also, whether you're doing just a billing program or just a coding program or one that is combined. So why would a program do billing and coding? Very candidly, they want to prepare you to get a job. Depending on the setting that you work in. A smaller practice setting, let's say you work for a 2-physician specialty office, they may not be able to afford to have both a biller and a coder with that salary. Their volume may not support that. So they might need a person that has billing and coding. So it's not bad if you get in a combined program. You just have to understand what that looks like from a career perspective for you. Okay. If your program is online, you may get some flexibility in your scheduling. If it's live, maybe not, right? Because they've got to fit you into a class and slot for that and all of that. So determine what your learning style is. I would never take a math class online. Anything that included anything mathematical, I would never take online. I could take maybe a psychology class online and be comfortable with it, never a math class, right? So the format is going to be important for you. What is the certification of the program? Well, let's start duration. What's the duration of the program? So when we talk about the elements of a program, right? So a good billing and coding program is going to include 7 elements. Sounds like a compliance plan. 7 elements. It should cover medical terminology and anatomy, because the documentation we reference to do our work is not in a layperson's terms. So you have to be able to translate that documentation. And sometimes the words in the documentation that you're looking at authored by the provider doesn't perfectly match the documentation or the words in the book, right? So you have to be able to translate and say, hey, resection means excision. This is the code for it, right? This patient has this condition, this is the code for it, to codify, if you would. So medical terminology and anatomy are 2 key elements of a program. It's also helpful if it has pathophysiology, because you need to know when you're going through a record, and even with symptom coding and diagnosis coding, things like that, how the body's made up. You have to know. One of our diagnosis guidelines is you don't code symptoms of a disease. So like if I had a cold, I could have a lot of things going on with a cold. It's still a cold, right? I might have stuffy nose, cough, fever, whatever, right? It's still a cold. So I wouldn't need to code all those things. I would just code the diagnosis for a cold, right? But if you don't understand pathophysiology, that is how a body functions and works in disease, you won't know what's not codable, right? And what's captured into that code. So that's why pathophysiology is important. 4, pharmacology, if you have it. And I know you feel like, my God, how much do I have to know to do coding properly? I make these suggestions because, again, I'm an auditor. I'm an educator. I'm a consultant, and I look at multi-specialty records, and you have to be able to connect all of those. E&M is one of the areas that a lot of people don't hate, that a lot of people hate. I don't personally, kind of hate it. I think it's easier when it's understandable, and it's understandable the more anatomy, pathophysiology, and terminology you know. Then you get into your coding system. So your ICD-10, it should cover both CM and PCS, because we are in both of those systems now. CPT, right? So that's your procedural coding that will be done if you work on the pro side. And because you don't have a job yet, when you're searching, you don't know where you're going to land. So the program really should be preparing you, if they're gearing you for a certification, to adequately perform wherever you land. And then your HCPC. So there's 7 elements of a coding program. Elements that should be included in every billing program. And these are just minimum elements. They should have other things in them too, but these are things that you're good to go if it has these. In a billing program, you want to have claims completion. So you also should have payer systems, right? So they should be able to tell you what is the government program, like the Medicare versus Medicaid versus TRICARE versus commercial insurance. It should also cover insurance terminology, right? So what are co-payments, deductibles, out-of-pockets, things like that. It should teach you claim completions. Again, whether you're coding for the pro side or the pro side or the facility side, you should understand that, as well as denial codes and insurance law. Those are key components of a billing program, right? So when you are going to interview these schools, say, I'd like to see your course outline, right? I'd like to know like what you're going to teach me. And that takes me to my next point, the duration. So I just covered a lot of data in both the billing and the coding. How long are they giving you to learn it? And I saw like a program, someone sent it to me, I can't remember, they're like, oh, like 3 days, learn coding in a weekend, or 3 days. And I'm thinking, I don't want a 3-day coding program. One, I don't need it, but if anyone needed it, I certainly would not recommend it to them. There is a difference between teaching you to code well and teaching you to pass a certification. The latter could set you up for failure, even though you need a certification, right? The proper certification. You have to remember, like the CPC exam, the CCS exam, those coding exams are multiple choice, right? Our work is not multiple choice. So what often happens when you're prepared for the exam and they teach you to the exam, if you're lucky to even pass the exam, when you get in the real world environment where they give you a coding test, which is really just you duplicating what you would do if you sat in a coding seat, you can't do it because we've just removed the multiple choice option from you, meaning you can't actually do the core function of coding. Be cautious. This is also an industry that's one of integrity. So if you take a test, right, and your study guide is the test with the answers on it, and they collect it afterwards, right, and it's the exact same questions that you see on your test, someone set you up for failure. It's a position of integrity, but outside of that, you're not going to run into that when you get in the industry. So now you've paid a lot of tuition, paid money, can't find a job, got a certification, and you can't duplicate what you learned in school. These organizations are not doing you anything but a disservice if that's what they do. So when you look at the duration of the program and everything that's included, do you have adequate time to have the information introduced to you, practice the information to see if you assimilate it, and be assessed and test on the information before you move on? And in a month, however long the program is, in a month, can you capture and regurgitate and apply and assimilate that information? again, because if not, your program may not be long enough. And listen, you can make a program infinite if you want. It does have to end at a point because you do have to have some personal responsibility with it. But some of the programs are not really geared. This is why they'll tell you after you spend tens of thousands of dollars. The highest program I think I heard was like $19,000 or something at one of the schools. Oh, well, you're going to have to take another course to prepare you for certification. The question I would ask you, then why are you there? Because if you have to pay additional money on top of student loans, because if you do a live program, chances are they're cost prohibitive for some people. The money that you're going to have to pay back is so high, you don't want to have to spend another few $1,000s for a certification prep program, or $1,000, whatever it may be, right? They have different ones, all everywhere, but you shouldn't need it. You shouldn't need it if your program prepared you well. So do indeed factor the duration. When you're doing the interview with these schools or programs, you want to ask them, your instructors, are they certified, right? So I want that job at Florida Medical Center, or I want that job at, what's it, Vallejo? Vallejo Coding Resources. Like that's the job I want. Do the people teaching in the program hold the credentials I'm going to need to get that job I want? Because if not, you may want to reconsider the program. What some of the schools do is they are what they call institutionally accredited, right? Now, not all programs will certify a program, right? So like AHIMA has approved programs, that they accredited programs. For a CPC, there's really no approved program. You just go straight to the AAPC for it, or go to one of their instructors that teaches their curriculum. That's the closest thing you're going to get to it. You can go to their site for that. But a school will tell you, yes, we're accredited. And they're not lying to you. They are accredited. They are what they called institutionally accredited, right? So the school and the building is accredited, but the programs may not necessarily be accredited by the right bodies, right, in order for you to sit. So you may take a degree program and then you go to someone like AHIMA and say, hey, I want to sit for the RHIT exam. And they say, you can't. You didn't attend an approved program, right, or an accredited program with AHIMA. Or, the AAPC doesn't kind of accept what you might be looking for. So make sure your program is accredited. And if your program's not accredited, because let's say you're going for the CPC, you may not need an accredited program, you want to ask, are all the instructors that teach in the program certified through AHIMA and or AAPC? If you stay with AHIMA and AAPC from a general coding standpoint, you're going to be in good shape, because I can't really prepare you for an exam I haven't taken, correct? Right? So you do want to make sure you have that information, because otherwise you may be in a program, and it, again, doesn't mean someone can't teach you because they're not certified, but I can't really teach you what to experience on the exam if I haven't at least set for it. So certification of the program and instructor. And where's my last one? Yes, scope. Scope. Is it billing? Is it coding? Is it both? Look for your course outline. Find out what kind of support you have, right? If you have one of those crazy schedules where you need something at your own pace, then what does your support look like in the form of that? Like, how will my instructor support me if I'm doing it at my own pace? Okay, so those are really 5 considerations when looking for a billing and or coding program. As it relates to billing, do the same thing. Look for the jobs, see what they look for. If you don't see a particular certification, then you might be in good shape, right? From a billing perspective, like I think I've seen CBCS on one job and then I don't see it. Look for biller. If you have billing and coding, it's best if you have both, because again, for smaller practices, they cannot afford to hire 2 people. Billers have to know something about coding. Maybe not to the same level as someone who just does coding, but they may have to correct claims. So they do have to have a basic knowledge of coding in order to do that properly. They may, you know what I mean? So learning both is not a bad thing, and it really gives you a heads up for those practices that may want to use you in both capacities, or for ones where you can get your foot in the door. The truth of the matter is, you're probably more likely to get your foot in the door as a biller with no experience than as a coder. Did not say it was an impossibility. It happens all the time. I have project extern. I hire people that are just, I bring them on as externs that have zero experience whatsoever, and I train them, right? So that's fine. There are companies that still do it. It's not a lot of us, but there are people out there in organizations that do that. So it's not an impossibility, but truly you may be more likely to find yourself getting into a billing position than a coding position. And let me tell you, my favorite people do billing and coding. I gotta tell you, the best coders actually sometimes are the ones who have billing experience, because coders don't often get the denial part of it. They don't understand the denials and the ways to variably report a service. Like, well, no, the book says I report it this way, but a payer policy could tell you something different than the book, and that payer policy then overrides the book. So I hope you found this video helpful. I'd love your feedback. If you're interested in more videos like this, give me ideas down in the comment box. Feel free to like, subscribe, so you know when I load if you find that interesting. And always trying to help you. I wish you well on your coding journey, and I hope you have a great day.